December 19th, 1944, Verdun, France. The air in the Allied command bunker is thick with controlled panic. The German Ardennes offensive has ripped a massive hole in the American front. Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower asks his generals for a counterattack to relieve the besieged forces. How long would it take? One voice cuts through the room. General George S. Patton. He can attack in 48 hours. The other commanders are stunned. It seems impossible, a reckless boast. Turning an entire army already in combat 90 degrees and marching at 100 miles in the snow? Was this pure arrogance or the result of something else entirely? But Patton's promise was no boast. It was the activation of a detailed operational plan, one his staff had secretly developed for over a month. While Supreme Allied headquarters enjoyed a false sense of security, convinced the German army was broken, one general's intelligence section was preparing for a catastrophe no one else believed was coming. How did this one team see the danger when the combined intelligence of the Allied High Command saw only a quiet front? To understand how one general's staff could be so right, we must first understand how nearly everyone else could be so wrong. By late autumn of 1944, a dangerous optimism had settled over the Allied High Command. Paris was free. The German army had been shattered and routed across France. At Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, or SHAEF, the mood wasn't just hopeful, it was bordering on triumphant. The war, it seemed, was all but won. This belief was codified into official doctrine, championed by Eisenhower's own Chief of Intelligence, British Major General Kenneth Strong. His daily intelligence summaries painted a consistent, logical picture. The Wehrmacht was a spent force. It had lost irreplaceable men and materiel since D-Day. Its factories were being systematically bombed. Most critically, it had no fuel. The official consensus was clear. Germany was incapable of launching any major offensive action. This assessment had direct tactical consequences. The Ardennes Forest, a hilly, densely wooded region on the Belgian-German border, was designated a quiet zone. It became a nursery for green American divisions fresh from the States, and a rest area for veterans exhausted by months of combat. The strategic risk was deemed almost zero. This institutional blindness infected everything, even the Allies' greatest secret, the ultra-decrypts. The codebreakers at Bletchley Park, who read Germany's most secret communications, were tasked with a single, overriding priority: find signs of German weakness. They were hunting for the breaking point, the perfect spot for the next Allied attack. The entire intelligence apparatus was facing forward, looking for a place to punch through. No one thought to look over their shoulder, but in one corner of the front, a small team was looking over their shoulder. On November 9th, at the headquarters of the U.S. Third Army, its Chief of Intelligence, Colonel Oscar Koch, presented a briefing that directly contradicted the official narrative. His analysts had been tracking a series of faint, disconnected signals, veteran German divisions being pulled off the line and vanishing from Allied charts, the sudden appearance of a new, shadowy 6th Panzer Army being held deep in reserve, and most ominously, intercepted reports of a massive fuel collection program. While Supreme Headquarters saw this as preparation for defense, Koch connected the dots to form a chillingly different picture. The Germans weren't preparing to absorb a blow. They were husbanding their last strategic assets for a massive counteroffensive. His report concluded the most logical target was the thinly held Ardennes sector on his army's northern flank. A single colonel's analysis was now a direct challenge to the comfortable certainty of the entire Allied High Command. The warning had been delivered. The question was, would anyone listen? George Patton listened. Unlike many of his peers, Patton held a deep, professional respect for the German army. He never underestimated its capacity for resilience and surprise, and he had absolute, unshakable faith in his intelligence chief, Colonel Oscar Koch. So, after that briefing on November 9th, Patton did not dismiss the warning. He turned to his operations staff and gave a quiet but momentous order: start planning. He wanted detailed, actionable contingencies for a full-scale 90-degree pivot of the entire Third Army, plans to halt its eastward offensive, turn north, and counterattack into Luxembourg. For the next 5 weeks, as the Third Army fought a bloody, grinding battle for the fortress of Metz and the Saar River, a small team on Patton's staff worked in secret. This was the unglamorous, methodical heart of a blitz maneuver. They developed not one, but 3 distinct courses of action. These were not vague concepts. They were logistical masterpieces. The staff charted every road, every bridge. They calculated fuel consumption down to the last gallon. They pre-designated traffic control points to manage the inevitable chaos of moving 250,000 soldiers. They created precise march tables for tens of thousands of vehicles. It was a plan to move a city, at speed, in the dead of winter. straight into a hypothetical battle. Meanwhile, Colonel Koch's warnings did not stay within the Third Army. They were sent up the chain of command, where they landed on the desks of General Strong's intelligence team at Supreme Headquarters, and they were systematically rejected. Strong's logic was powerful, and it was based on the Allies' most valuable asset, ultra-intelligence. The decrypts from Bletchley Park, which had revealed German intentions time and again, were silent. There was no radio traffic indicating a massive buildup, no high-level chatter about an offensive. Furthermore, Allied analysis of Germany's fuel situation was definitive. They simply did not have the gasoline to support a major armored push. The conclusion at SHAEF was not born of arrogance, but of evidence. What Koch was describing was, by their metrics, a physical impossibility. His warnings were filed as a worst-case scenario, a contingency of extremely low probability. But across the front, under the dense canopy of the Eifel forests and shrouded by the worst winter weather in years, Koch's fears were taking physical form. Hitler had scraped together his last strategic reserve. The newly formed 6th Panzer Army, commanded by the fanatical SS General Sepp Dietrich, was quietly assembling. Its spearhead units were equipped with the newest, most powerful tanks of the war, the 70-ton King Tiger. The entire buildup was conducted under a blanket of absolute secrecy. No radio transmissions, all movement at night. Soldiers were told this was the Entscheidungsschlacht, the decisive battle, an offensive that would shatter the American front, seize the port of Antwerp, and force the Western Allies to sue for peace. Their security was so total, it created a vacuum. To Allied reconnaissance, this absence of evidence became evidence of absence, confirming SHAEF's belief that the front was quiet. On December 12, 1944, just 4 days before the attack, Colonel Koch delivered his final intelligence summary to Patton. He was no longer hedging. His assessment was unequivocal. A major German offensive was imminent. It would begin within days, and it would strike the overstretched American 8th Corps in the Ardennes. That same day, Patton confided his own deep unease to his diary. He wrote, "The First Army is making a terrible mistake in leaving the 8th Corps with a frontage of 88 miles, and I am sure that the Germans are going to hit them there." The plans were ready. The general was waiting. His army had prepared for a fire. They had the trucks, the water, and the maps to the blaze. But they had no idea they were about to face a conflagration that would stretch for 80 miles. The legend of Patton's foresight often stops there, with his secret plans locked and loaded. But the reality was far more precarious. Colonel Koch's intelligence team, for all their accuracy on location and timing, had prepared for a limited, spoiling attack. Their absolute worst-case scenario predicted a German assault with 4, maybe 5, divisions. No one in the Allied camp, not even the prescient staff of the Third Army, conceived of the true scope of Hitler's final gamble, an all-or-nothing blitzkrieg involving nearly 30 divisions, 15 of them Panzer and Panzergrenadier. Their objective wasn't just to disrupt Patton's flank, but to split the Allied armies in two and seize the vital port of Antwerp. Patton was prepared for a battle, but not for the inferno that was actually coming. The Germans had achieved total strategic surprise in scale, if not in location. And now, the storm was about to break. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16, 1944, along an 80-mile front, 2,000 German artillery pieces erupted in a single, deafening roar. The thin American lines in the Ardennes, caught by total surprise, disintegrated. Communications collapsed into chaos. 3 days later, we are back in the bunker at Verdun. Supreme Commander Eisenhower looks at his generals, desperate for a counterpunch. And now, Patton's answer is no longer a boast. It is the execution order for a plan weeks in the making. 48 hours. Immediately after the meeting, Patton was on the phone to his headquarters. He gave a pre-arranged code phrase. The machine lurched into motion. The great 90-degree turn of the Third Army had begun. 250,000 men and 20,000 vehicles, a river of steel, began to move day and night through ice and snow. This was not a desperate improvisation. It was a controlled, rehearsed maneuver, aimed directly at the exposed southern flank of the German Bulge, and the desperate American paratroopers surrounded at Bastogne. And so, the legend was born, Patton's miracle run to Bastogne. But it was no miracle, nor the product of one general's mystical foresight. It was the direct outcome of a professional culture that valued dissent, where an intelligence officer like Colonel Oscar Koch could build a compelling case from faint signals, and a commander would trust that analysis over the comfortable consensus of his superiors. The story of the Third Army's turn is not about predicting the future with perfect accuracy. It's about the methodical, unglamorous work of preparing for a catastrophe everyone else insisted was impossible. It reveals the true function of intelligence, not to own a crystal ball, but to force an organization to build the fire extinguisher, just in case. In the end, Patton's greatest weapon wasn't a tank or a cannon. It was the simple willingness to listen to a warning that everyone else had chosen to dismiss.